What's going on, everyone? It's Ben from YGO from Zero, back with another retro Yu-Gi-Oh video and back with another dad return format video. This format has been, well, I'm not going to say it's been too fun exploring it, but it's been a time for sure. Kind of just like a crazy format held in the April 2008 SJC Minneapolis, and using the March 2008 ban list with the new card from Phantom Darkness, which was one of the most game-breaking sets of all time. This format super fast-paced. Dad is for some reason at 3 copies. Who knows why? Monster Reborn's also legal here. So Dad return decks kind of dominate the meta, which is what gave the format its name. And I do think that that deck is like the best deck in the room by far. There are some other decks that can compete with it here and there, but overall the deck is pretty good and it chokes out a lot of jank. So there won't really be too many more jank videos after this one. I think I'll just do one more after this one with the Gigaplant list. But as I've been experimenting with this list here, which is basically Evil Hero Dark Gaia OTK, like at least that's generally what I started out as, I actually realized that this deck does have some gas against Dad Return. And actually playing it out and testing it out and theory crafting it, I actually do think this deck can be somewhat of a contender. Now, maybe not tier 1, but maybe something like tier 2. And I think the reason why it can actually be a contender is not necessarily going for Evil Hero Dark Gaia OTK shenanigans, which is one way you can do the deck, before building the deck itself. I saw a lot of people trying out things where they were like playing heavy trade-in packages, playing Valkyrie and the Magna Warrior, and also things like Mass Beast or Demise, King of Armageddon to, sort of just turbo through the deck, get into Dark Calling, just make a huge Evil Hero Dark Gaia, which is a fusion monster that's made with a Fiend monster and a Rock monster, that's brought out with Dark Calling, which can banish fusion materials from your hand and or graveyard to bring it out. And this thing is just big because it gains the attack of the combined attack of the 2 monsters made to make it. And then when it declares an attack, you get to change all defense position monster opponent controls to attack position, so you get to attack in for a ton of damage, right? So the way that people often try to build is just buffing this thing up to Kingdom Come and just attacking in for a ton of damage. But in exploring what was actually in the card pool and what rocks were available specifically, because I didn't necessarily want to go the Valkyrian route because I felt it was kind of awkward, I hit upon Barrier Statue of the Drought. And Barrier Statue of the Drought is actually pretty good in this format because a lot of the times Dad Return decks are playing a lot of special summon monsters, and most of those monsters are dark. Pretty much all of them are dark, actually. So if you just summon out Barrier Statue of the Drought, and your opponent doesn't have a way to get into like Stratos or Dark Gruffer, which are the 2 main ways that they can actually get over this thing, then they're not going to clear it, right? And even if they do clear it that way, they can't really go for any like intense dash shenanigans until main phase 2, which gives you actual time to sort of mount a counteroffensive, which this deck can do because you're trying to, at the end of the day, build a big guy like Evil Hero Dark Gaia and go for things like that. Another advantage that this deck has, playing Barrier Statue of the Drought, is that since Dark Calling actually banishes it, you can actually play something like Release from Stone to bring it back to the field, kind of like a quick play Royal Oppression. Royal Oppression is also in this format, but it's the old bad version of Royal Oppression, based on how Continuous Traps worked at the time. You actually had to have Royal Oppression flipped face up before your opponent actually did something. So like, for instance, if you had Oppression set face down and your opponent activated Monster Reborn, you could not flip up that Oppression to negate the Reborn. The Oppression would have to already be up, so your opponent would not waste the Reborn there. However, with Release from Stone, if you chain Release from Stone to something like a Monster Reborn and then bring back a Barrier Statue of the Drought, then the Reborn will not be able to resolve, right? It won't be able to bring anything back unless it's an Earth monster and they have to target before, they spell summon it. So, it very likely will not be bringing anything back. So, Release from Stone, actually really good in this deck if you get the Dark Callings off. And, it also pairs with Gigantes, which is another rock that we can play here, and another way to get Barrier Statue of the Drought banished. We also have other ways to get it banished, like Gold Sark as well. But, this sort of strategy does open up some other options for things like Dark Calling. Like, potentially there's a world in which you have like a very weak, option for bringing out Evil Hero Dark Gaia, but you go for it anyways just to get the Barrier Statue banished to Release from Stone it back. So there's a lot of very cool sort of outcomes you can do with this deck. I think it's a lot of fun and a very, very interesting deck to boot. So I really enjoyed building this thing and actually testing it out. I think it has a lot of gas, and I'm excited to see what other people do with it because it's definitely not in its final form. There are definitely some iffy inclusions here. And also, as you'll see in the games, I'm not like 100% at playing the deck to its maximum efficiency. It does take a lot of thought to actually play. It's not just like, a brain dead deck that you can just like load up and, just play however you want to. It actually is a very, very tricky deck. And you do have to take some risks sometimes. You have to play in interesting ways to set up different plays down the line. But I think overall it's a very, very rewarding deck to play. So I'm excited to show it off here. So going more, in detail in the card by card, I already talked about the Barrier Statue, the Drop package, and the Gigantes package here to banish it. But we also have Neospacian Grand Mole, which is another rock here. Now, the main reason we play this, not just because, like, you can bounce something back, so potentially your opponent goes for Dad and then banishes some Darks from Grave, so then you bounce this back, prevent them from bringing up the Dad again, potentially. But the main reason you play this is because you get Elemental Hero Prisma in the deck as well, and this can send a fusion material off of a fusion monster from your extra deck. It has to be specific fusion material, so you can't send a specific fiend or rock based off Evil Hero Dark Gaia. You have to get a bit creative there. So you can send Grand Mole off of Elemental Hero Grandiose or Elemental Hero Magnineos, but we just have Grandiose here. So you can get this thing in the graveyard pretty easily if you are in desperate need of a rock, because these rocks can't really be searched out that easily. Yes, we do have a Sangan here to search them, but oftentimes you're not searching the rocks with the Sangan because there are other better things that you can search, like Evil Hero Infernal Prodigy. Now, this is a fiend, but generally not one that you're planning on using with Dark Calling. Generally, use this to set up for your other fiends, right? The big fiends in the deck are Kaiath the Shadow Monarch and Evil Hero Malicious Edge. And both of these do greatly appreciate you having a monster on field to tribute for them. So Evil Hero Infernal Prodigy does set that up pretty nicely. And if you do tribute it for Malicious Edge, you get a draw in the end phase. So that's another bonus there. This thing can be basically like a Cyber Dragon, although a bit worse of a Cyber Dragon, but it is still something. And it can be very, very useful in certain game states. And it can also be searched off of Elemental Hero Stratus, which we're using to search the Prismas, the Infernal Prodigies, or the Malicious Edges, depending on what we need. Now, we do have one road in the deck to search out the Stratos or the Prisma. Those are the only two warriors in the deck, so I felt like one Rhoda was fine enough. You could potentially switch to an E-Call. You could potentially play more Rhodas if you want that, or potentially buff out your hero package a little bit, maybe play Disc Commander or something like that as well. I felt like this package was fine enough. I didn't really feel the need to, turbo into this all too often, although you do definitely want to get this out. There are other normal summons that you're using in this deck, for instance, Barrier Statue of the Drought. If you do open that, oftentimes you just want to commit it to field. Now, it might be weird just to commit this thing to field without much protection, because we, frankly, are not playing much protection, right? We just have Mirror Force as the one battle stopper. Other than that, our traps are Crush Guard Virus for the Sangan or the Infernal Prodigies. Mind Crush because it's very, very good in this format. Release from Stones, as I mentioned. We only have two of these because, it can be a bit tricky to set up Barrier Statue of the Drought. So, you don't want to brick on these things all too often, although we do have ways to clear out the bricks that I will mention a little bit later. But it can be a bit awkward there, so we just have two of them. But in future testing, that could be changed around a bit as well. TT, which would blow up the Barrier Statue as well, so it's not really worth viewing as a battle stopper. And Dust Shoot, which can potentially be kind of a weird way to protect your Barrier Statue, because if your opponent has like a Grepper or a Stratos in hand, you send that back to the deck and prevent them from actually getting over this thing. But generally, Dust Shoot's just very, very good for other reasons. So it might seem weird just to commit the Barrier Statue there. But again, as I mentioned, if they want to clear the Barrier Statue, they have to use their battle phase for that. And if they do clear this thing, it will be engraved for your Gigantes, for your Dark Callings. So I do think that it's perfectly fine to summon the thing out without protection in this format. And again, many decks are not playing too many things to actually beat over this, but we will actually see in the games that I feature in this video a deck that does play ways to beat over this. And that will sort of show how the deck can pivot in siding to sort of switch up its game plan pretty nicely. But that's just going to do it for the monsters. For the spells, we got a Brain Con, very, very good, treat for a Kaius, or even tribute for a Malicious Edge if you can pull that off. Card Destruction to dig deeper into the deck, along with triple Dark World Dealings to dig deeper in the deck. This was ultimately the sort of, digger that I picked on. Allure of Darkness is in this format, so you could use that instead. But I found, we're not playing too many dark targets, and the dark targets that we have, we don't necessarily want to get banished. The only thing that we have to return things from the Banish Zone are, the Release from Stones, which I do value more than something like Return. Return rebanishes things in the end phase, and paying half your life points to just stop a special something, you might as well be playing Solemn Judgment at that point. So I just felt like Release from Stone was a little bit better in that regard. But, you know, you could potentially switch this up with Return. And if you do play Return, I think that Allure might be a little bit better. But I do, you know, in testing, I think that Allure was a bit worse for this build of the deck. So I'm not playing Allure. I'm just playing Dark World Dealings here. Hand Destruction was another consideration, but I felt like the 2 cards that you had to pitch before knowing what you actually drew was a bit too much of a high cost for this deck to pay. So I just went with the Dealings. This can be a bit awkward, though, because it can set up your opponent's graveyard. But I think overall, this deck does need a consistency booster, and this is the one that I settled on. You could also potentially play Upstart Goblins. That's also an option. But I like Dealings a little bit better because it does set up your graveyard for things like Dark Calling, although since advantage from hand, you could just do that. But it also sets up things like Gigantes and things like that. So I do like Dealings a little bit better, but you know, Upstart is also an option, and probably a better option now that I think about it, because we're not really playing this like a pure OTK deck. We're kind of just playing this as a way to, you know, sort of set up a barrier statue lock after having a big monster on our side of the field like Evil Hero Dark Gaia. So these could definitely be replaced with Upstarts, but, you know, for the moment, I like the Dealings in the deck. We also get a True Native Heavy Storm and an MST to clear away the background. Now, not many people play like too much actual back row in this format because deck spaces are so tight, but these are good to have here in case you do run into a deck playing that. And just clearing the way for your own stuff is pretty good. We got a Gold Star here to set up Release from Stone plays, but also set up plays just in the future, like Banishing a Dark Calling. If you don't have that, is very good. And there are different things that you can set up. Banishing a Release from Stone is also pretty good, actually, because if you have the tools to actually make the Dark Gaia, you're sort of playing a couple turns in advance where your opponent has to clear the Gaia and stuff like that. But then by the time they do, then you get Release from Stone, and you're able to do stuff with that. So ultimately, pretty cool there. We've got a Monster Reborn and a Premat to bring back our own stuff, or our opponent's stuff. It can vary there. And then we got a Rhoda, as I mentioned before. For the side deck, we've got a couple different options here. We got triple DD Crow for nowhere up against Dad Return, and we're going second. I think this can be very good to bring in because it sort of shuts off your opponent's graveyard shenanigans. Like, you don't necessarily want to have them, you know, start at turn 1 and just get popping off with everything. So DD Crow helps mitigate that a little bit. We've got Legendary Jiu-Jitsu Master here for decks that, you know, don't care about Barrier Statue. Jiu-Jitsu Master can be very good because, you know, it's still a rock, so you can still play it with your Dark Callings and stuff, but it can potentially bounce back big monsters back to the top of the deck, which, you know, Barrier Statue of the Drought, if you're taking that out, they're probably playing big monster that they're normal something out, something like Gladiator Beast or 6M or something like that. And so I think Jiu-Jitsu Master is a worthy sort of replacement for it there. We got a Dim Fuse in case we're up against a deck that's not really banishing much. This can be good since we banish a fair bit, and it can help us go for OTKs. We got another Release from Stone. This was more just like in testing. I wanted to see, did I want the third Release from Stone? Did I not? So I kept in the side deck sort of as a way to tinker with the ratios in testing. We have a Return here as well as just sort of another sort of test thing to do. Again, as I mentioned, I don't think Return is as good as Release from Stone in this deck, given what we're trying to do, but it can sort of be an OTK enabler, kind of like Dim Fuse here. We've got triple Dim Priz in case we're up against a deck that is more battle focused. We got triple Dust Tornado in case we're up against a back row deck. And then for the extra deck, I already mentioned the Gramble and the Evil Hero Dark Gaia. The last one in the deck is Evil Hero Malicious Fiend. This lists Evil Hero Malicious Edge as a fusion material. And also, you can potentially go into this off Dark Calling as well if you want it. It's a 3,500 attack point guy. And during your opponent's battle phase, all monsters they control are changed to phase of attack vision, and each monster they control must attack this card if able. So there are weird edge cases where this can come up. So it is good to know about and potentially go into if you don't have access to the Dark Gaia and you want to still go for a lethal push, or if you're up against a deck that really suffers against this. Although, to be fair, not many decks suffer against this that much because they just don't go to battle phase. But again, if you're up against a battle-oriented deck, something like maybe Gladiator Beast, this could be good. But overall, you're generally just going into Dark Gaia and just using this for Prisma. But that's going to do it for the deck breakdown. Let's dive into some games to see how this deck actually plays in action, because I think that's where this deck really shines. So for the first game here, we're up against Dad Return, facing PJ Darkness, a frequent guest on the channel, but I want to show off the Dad Return match in particular, because I do think in a format where this deck is so dominant, it is good to show it off in at least every video, kind of like in Perfect Circle format where I wanted to show off Perfect Circle Monarch in the decks that I played. But my opponent's going to start off with an Upstart Goblin, draw one deeper, then go for a set pass. Okay, that's a pretty sort of slow opening for them, so I feel pretty good about that. Now, I could just summon out a Barrier Statue of the Drought and just leave it at that, but Dad Return does play tribute monsters in their deck, so it's kind of awkward to do that now. So actually, I think I might just want to set the Sangan, then get Infernal Prodigy, then special summon that out to go for Caius to banish whatever they have. So I feel like that could be a bit of a better option here. So I'm just going to set the Sangan, pass back to them, and see what they do. They're going to think about this a bit, go for a D-draw, pitching a Disc Commander, so that's a bit worrying. It might mean that they can draw into the tools to actually get a bit more explosive here. They're going to think about this a bit, go for Valley, go for Machine Dupe, and that's going to be very scary for us. They're going to bring out a Sire Valley and Sire Valley, and now they're in the money here. They can really pop off with this combo. So, bit unfortunate that we let them get to this, but I think attacking over their set would not have helped really. So, yeah, but maybe if I'd summoned out the Barrier Statue, the Drought, things could have changed a little bit. But we're going to go for the Valleys, draw 2 off that, and then go for another D-draw, pitching a Mally here. Now they can potentially banish Mally and then draw 2 more with the Sire Valley in hand there. They're just going to go for a Dark Grepher, and that's a bit worrying because now there are 1, 2, 3 Darks and Graves. That's very scary there. And we're going to give them a thumbs up to know we don't have a Crow or anything at this juncture. They're going to go for an Upstart there. And then they're going to banish the Grepher and the Valley. Phew, no dad, it looks like. They're going to think about this a little bit here, and they're going to go for a Reborn, target the Disc Commander. We've got no Crow, but this does get their grave down below 3 Darks, so I feel very good about that. They're going to draw 2 off the Disc Commander there. They're going to think about this a little bit, set 2, set 3, and then pass back to us. Now, I figure that this means that they probably have a Crush card here. That makes sense to me because, like, you know, they brought back this, like, pretty weak Dark. The Dad Return deck does not play too many back row, and Crush card is definitely one of them. So, yeah, they probably have a Crush card virus somewhere back there. So it's a bit of an interesting proposition here. Like, the question is, do I summon out Caius, potentially target one of their back row monsters to banish that? Or do I go for Trunade first and then go from there? Now, what I ultimately decided to do, I think, is the correct choice because at the end of the day, if I summon out Caius here, right, like, and target one of their cards, then, you know, the sub monster is probably another thing that can be tributed for Crush card. So if they've got Crush card, they can just tribute whatever monster I pick and still get rid of my Caius. If they don't have Crush card back there, then, yeah, I don't know what they've got there, but a Trunade will not make a difference here if I do it now. So I do think it ultimately is best to go for Trunade here. So that is what I ultimately do. And, yeah, if they chain Crush card, at least I can normal summon a Barrier Statue potentially. So, yeah, they go for Crush card there. They're going to tribute the Disc Commander, and we lose the Caius. They get full knowledge of our hand, but I'm in a pretty good spot here, I think, overall, because I do have Dark Calling and Release from Stone to bring back a Barrier Statue here. So ultimately, I feel pretty good. Now, I misread Dark Calling here. This is still, you know, again, very early in playing this deck, so I don't quite know all the cards as well as I should, so I apologize for this, but this is from hand or graveyard, not field or graveyard, so I go to set the Barrier Statue and then go for Dark Calling, but really, I should just keep it in hand, so luckily my opponent is gracious enough to just say, yeah, you can keep it in hand, so, you know, and just not use that as your normal summon, so I still get to do this. I go for Dark Calling, bring out Evil Hero Dark Gaia. Fun fact, if Barrier Statue is face up on the field, you can still go for Dark Calling for Evil Hero Dark Gaia because this is an Earth. So it actually does get around Barrier Statue of the Drought, so that's pretty nice there. We'll flip to Sangan, summon out this Barrier Statue, attack into their set with the Dark Gaia that will get flipped up there. And we can get in for a ton of damage. This does get them a search, which is a bit worrying here. But we do have Barrier Statue of the Drought up, and we also have a Release from Stone up, so we can potentially use that to get out another Barrier Statue. So I feel pretty good about this. They're just going to pass back to us. And they do have 1, 2, 3, 4 Darks Engraved, but, you know, if they do manage to clear the Barrier Statue, then they could potentially get the Mally out of there. So it's good to know. They go for Brain Con on the Evil Hero Dark Gaia here. And then they're going to attack into the Barrier Statue of the Drought. So this is a bit interesting. They're not, well, I guess it makes sense because it does clear the Barrier Statue. And then they're probably going to tribute the Evil Hero Dark Gaia in main 2, I assume. And I think about this a little bit here because I'm like, well, if they go Mally, like they banish Mally to summon on a Mally, then they get 3 Darks Engrave. I don't necessarily want that, but I think I should just like hold the Barrier Statue until it matters because like I was like, well, okay, you know, I want to prevent them from special summoning here, but everything that they would special summon, like it's not inherent. So like I can just chain the Barrier Statue to that, get them to use up a resource in some way. So I think that I should have probably held the Release from Stone here a little bit, especially because Jinzo's engraved, so I don't need to worry about that. And yeah, if they've got like, I don't know, like a Kite of their own, it won't matter here if I activate Release from Stone now or later, because, you know, they can just banish it that way. So I think I should hold the Release from Stone here, but I get greedy on it. I just bring back the Barrier Statue in defense. I don't think it matters too much here overall, but it is just something to note. And yeah, they just tribute set over the Dark Gaia and set 2 back row, pass back to us. So again, I think I probably should have held the Barrier Statue there and just saved it for when they actually tried to use a special summon effect, because they still have 4 Darks Engrave here. I know about the Mally that they searched out. So actually, they couldn't even search out the Mally that way because, you know, it can't fail to find. So I'm just going to attack into it with the Sangan in case they get Mirror Force. I keep the Barrier Statue up here and pass back to them. I guess there is potentially a risk here. So I probably should have, yeah. So if I held the Release from Stone, I probably should have just used it in the end phase here, honestly, of their previous turn, just in case they had return set up there. Because if they've got double return in the back row, then they can chain return to my Release from Stone after I chain this to their return. So, yeah, probably is for the best that I brought this out the turn that I did. So I don't think it made a difference here. It's just good to note, like, the correct line of play here. Just, you know, to know it in the future, right? So they do bring out a Stratos here. No effect. I think they've gone through all their other heroes. They probably had Dasher in hand, that means. But if they had Dasher in hand, then why didn't they summon it? So they might even not be playing Dasher here. But now that they've done that, gotten rid of the Buried Statue of the Drought, they're going to special summon out Grepher by pitching this Dark Magician of Chaos here. And now they're going to go for a pre-mat on the Demok. So that will be able to bring back the Demok. They can grab back Reborn and do even crazier plays here. But again, you know, this is in main too. You know, they weren't able to do this in the main phase 1. So we did survive this turn. So that's sort of what I'm saying. We are in a pretty bad spot because we don't actually have the best things to, you know, do here. But we do have some options, right? Like we've got a Caius and Barrier Statue engraved. So if we top deck a Dark Calling, that's pretty good. We can go for a 3400 Gaia to beat over like their Disc Commander and win the game from that. So, you know, we have some options. Mirror Force is an option as well. So we can draw that. And that's the last turn on Crush card. Since we don't have the Dark Calling or anything, we're just going to attack over the Disc Commander now. Get it back engraved, but this does lower their life points a little bit more. So the Mirror Force pass back to them. Now, they do have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Dark Monsters engraved, so they're very, very far from getting a dad online here. So I feel pretty comfortable about this Mirror Force surviving. They're going to attack in with the Demok into the Sangan. Now, I could hold the Mirror Force because they're attacking in knowing it's there. So, like, I could be like, well, they probably have, like, return or something here, and they get out a bunch of things in return. But I don't know. If they return, then everything will go back to the Banish Zone at the end of the turn. So we'll still clear their board, and they're very, very low life. So I do think it is still ultimately good to Mirror Force here. This does protect my life points a little bit because if they go return here, they got to bring out the Grepher and the Demok as opposed to having the Stratos as well. So I will save a little bit of life, but you could argue that this is a mistake. I still think it is correct, but I don't know. It's a bit tricky here because they do get those valleys back and those valleys are very good. But if I'm not going to use the Mirror Force now, when am I going to use it, right? So I think this is still probably okay, but they get back a Reborn with that. Attack over the Sangan here. That will get banished so I don't get a search. Then Grepher will attack in for 17. And then they'll set 1. And they'll pass back to us. So they're not going to go for these Cyber Valley banishes. That's very interesting. They are pretty low in deck, so maybe they don't want to do it for that reason. But I feel like going for a draw 2 seems good, right? Like, I don't know. They might also have just everything that they need, so they don't feel the need to do that. But Malicious Edge will not help us here, unfortunately. That is a bit of a brick, and that is a problem that this deck can have. In top deck mode, it is kind of bad. Yes, you do have the Dark Callings to top deck into things, but if you draw into like Malicious Edge or a Caius or something when you don't have tribute material for it, then it is pretty awkward. But not much we can really do about that. So we're just going to pass back to our opponent. They do have Reborn here, which we do know about, and they've got Return as well, so it does not matter here. We're going to lose the game there either way, and yeah, that's going to be Dunzo for us. But I think the deck did pretty well there in that game 1. It managed to get them pretty low, and I think the Barrier Statue control stuff actually did show off pretty well what it can do. So we're going to go into the game 2 here, see how it actually goes. This is a great hand to start off with. I mean, any hand with Death Shoot's great. But what makes this so great is that we've got Barrier Statue of the Drought as well. So we can potentially spin back whatever they have to beat over the Barrier Statue of the Drought after we summon this out. And if they do attack over this, and this is one of the nice things about the deck, if they do attack over this, it's engraved, so we can just go for Dark Calling, banish the Caius and the Barrier Statue, get that out, and then have Release from Stone as follow-up on the following turn. So I feel like this is pretty good here. We just summon out the Barrier Statue, set the Trap Death Shoot. No need to set Release from Stone until we actually have the Barrier Statue banished. I mean, yes, there is a world in which we want to bring it back on our turn, but realistically, the main reason why we want to bring this back is to stop what our opponent's doing on their turn. No Call of the Han in this format, so you know, I feel like it's fine just to sort of set Release from Stone once the Barrier Statue actually banished. But we go for a Death Shoot here, get a peek at their hands. See, they're on Grepher, Dark Arm Dragon, Return from the Different Dimension, Destiny Draw, Upstart Goblin. Those are all standard. Curse Seal, the Forbidden One, though, is a bit of a scary one here because that will be able to stop our Dark Callings and prevent us from using Dark Callings for the rest of the game. So that is a bit scary. Something to note there. But if we manage to spin back their Dark Grepher, and they don't have a way to beat over Barrier Statue, then we could potentially snipe it in the back row with this Caius here. So not the end of the world. It's just something to keep in mind for both this game and also, if we make it to game 3, what they might have there for us. So they're going to go for an upstart here. Now, this could draw them into a way to beat over the Barrier Statue, so it's kind of unfortunate. There's an argument to be made that I should have waited on the Dust Shoot for, if they had a Rhoda or something like that. But I do think it is important just to do this now, because if they have like a Greffer or a Stratus or something in hand already, then they could just summon that out and beat over this thing. So it wouldn't matter there overall anyways. And with that Curse Seal, it would be, brutal for the Dark Calling. I didn't know about the Curse Seal beforehand, but either way, it's just good to stop what they might have before they actually can do it. So they're going to set 1, and we're just going to Caius that back row, hoping it's the Curse Seal, and it looks like it will indeed be the Curse Seal of Forbidden Spell. So we are able to get rid of that and attack in for 2,400. So I feel pretty good about that. We'll set a Mirror Force here. Again, we have not banished the Barrier Statue with the Dark Calling. We can sort of wait on that until they actually clear the Caius, and then we can go from there, right? So they're going to set 1, pass back to us. We draw into another Dark Calling here. Not really the most useful right now, so you can sort of classify this as a brick. But honestly, like, I'm in a good spot. I don't need to really push further with this Caius. I can just keep attacking in. I'll set a barrier release from stone, that is, because if they got Heavy Storm, this can bait that out, I guess. But, like, realistically, I'm in a good spot. So I can just, I said it because I don't really have anything else to do. In hindsight, maybe I should have just, like, held it in hand. But I don't think it really matters that much here overall. They're going to set 2 more, pass back to us. I feel like some of those are bluffs, just given the hand knowledge that we have. If they do have a TT in the macro, though, I want to play around that, so I'm just going to attack him with Caius first in main phase 1, or not main phase 1, battle phase. And then main phase 2, I'm going to go for Stratos here. Get a search of a card. If they've got TT, they probably use it now. If not, we get to search out Infernal Prodigy for later. Now, this can potentially even be a Dark Calling play here. And actually, I think in hindsight, I probably should have just gone for Dark Calling at this point. And the reason I should have done this, like, it would have been awkward, right? It's just banishing the Infernal Prodigy and the Barrier Statue. But I could have played around this to actually have it be Malicious Edge that I searched off the Stratos, and then banish that and the Barrier Statue. But I think it just would have been good to have for the release from stone here, right? Because if I have release from stone, I can just lock out whatever potential comeback they might have here. And that would have been really, really good. So I think I should have done that. Yes, it is putting a ton of cards on board here. Lightning Vortex is really brutal in that case, but we still win with release from stone on the Barrier Statue coming back, attacking in for 1,000. So I think it would have been the better choice to make. But, hindsight's 2020. And again, I'm still new to this deck. So I think this does show sort of the complexity of plays that you can do with this deck. I chose to search out the Infernal Prodigy for more follow-up later. But I think really the thing this deck should be trying to do is set up the release from stone Barrier Statue play here more often than not. They go for a Valley here, and then just pass back to us. We draw a Gramble, which is pretty decent here. We're just going to attack into the Valley, again, playing around TT. Doesn't really matter here because they get to banish that and draw it anyways. And then we'll just pass back to them. Again, I should have gone for Dark Calling here, even if it's later in the game, and, I didn't search out Malicious Edge. There's going to be a really weak Evil Clear Dark Gaia, just 13 on our attack. I think I should have gone for it because setting up the release from stone play is so good in this deck. So, I really should have done that, but I didn't think of it at the time. And I do get a bit punished for that. They go for a return play here, bring back that Valley, just to get it on field. And then they go for a Machine Dupe, bringing out 2 more Valleys. So those will indeed go through there. And now they'll be able to banish 2 Valleys, draw 2 cards. And now they're getting a ton of card advantage, and they're getting a ton of draws as well. And so it's just going to be pretty bad for us. They get to go for Greffer here as well, pitching a Zerato and Demock to bring it out, and then Zerato to send a Mally. And now they get 3 Darks Engrave, and we know they have Dad, so they can bring out the Dad if they want to, and they are indeed going to bring out the Dad. Go for Prio to banish the Zerato there, interestingly enough. Pop the Mirror Force. Go for the Dad again to pop the release from stone that we had set there. And yeah, now things are looking a bit grim for us here. They're going to banish the Valley and the Greffer there, draw 2 more. And they're luckily going to stop at that, just attacking into the Stratos there. And then they're going to go for D-draw, pitching a Plasma, drawing 2. And then they're just going to pass back to us. So again, I could have shut all this off with a release from stone. And if they had gotten a bit better draws here, we might have just been dead this turn. So that is how explosive this Dad Return deck can be. And that is why it's very, very scary, and why you should set up the release from stone play if you have it, because we really could have stopped pretty much all of that with release from stone. The other set was just a Curse Seal. So actually, Curse Seal would have stopped the Dark Calling anyways. So we wouldn't have been able to get to this point, but I think it still would have been something worth trying here. But as is, we luckily do have the tools to actually get out of this. Now, I could potentially just, sort of commit the Infernal Prodigy here, set Crush card, do stuff with that. But what I decided to do instead is I decided to go for Grand Mole here and then just attack Grand Mole into the dad and then attack directly with the Kais. And that is just good enough because the back row is a curse seal. So very, very intense game too. And, again, I think I misplayed that one a little bit. Even though it would have been stopped by the curse seal, I think it's good to consider what the best sort of thing to do in these situations would be. And, it's just like this deck is very new because I just built it. And as far as I know, other people have not really done this sort of thing in this format. I actually got the idea from like Edison format a little bit because there were some decks playing like Release from Stone during back Kokimera Guardian at different points over the course of this deck's lifespan there. But in this format, it plays a little bit differently based on just the different metagame, right? Not having access to just a ton of decks that like play a bunch of beaters to beat over your barrier statues is a big thing here. And I think this deck is uniquely suited to this format. Like, I'm not sure this deck will really work in the coming formats. I mean, next format's Gladiator Beast format, so obviously barrier statues are really, really bad against that. But I think Dad Returns actually, this is probably the strongest this version of the deck can be here. In this like sort of general theory, right? Not the exact build. Because again, this build's unoptimized, but I do think it's pretty good overall. But we decided in the Crows here because I felt like, going second against Dad Return, you want to stop whatever plays they might have here. So I did go for that, which is pretty good. And I got Gold Sark and Release from Stone. So that is combo, or a combo that we can do in the deck. So we banish the Barrier Statue of the Drought, and then we can set Release from Stone and TT here, pass back to them. The reason for setting both of these, yes, they could have like pro set heavy or something, or they could just heavy our entire board here, and then we lose out on that. If we do lose out on the Release from Stone, though, we are drawing the Barrier Statue of the Drought eventually anyways. We also do have this DD Crow here, so we can go for that. But I actually make a bit of a mistake here, in my opinion. I pitched the Crow to banish the Mali. I think this is actually a big error on my part. I think what I should have done is if they go for Mali, I think I just bring out Barrier Statue with a Release from Stone. I think that would have been the better play to do here, but I don't think that far ahead. And again, I'm not as used to the deck as I should be. So I just go for the Crow on the Mali to just get it out of there before it can do anything, too bad to us. So I think that was a misplay on my part. Whether it's like a major misplay or a minor misplay, you can debate about that. But I do think it is a misplay. And I think it's important to point out those misplays when they happen. I'm going to set a Dust Shoot here and then pass back to my opponent. They got 6 cards in hand. Let's see what they got. We go for Dust Shoot here. And we see they've got Mirror Force, Brain Con, Dim Fusion, Return from the Different Dimension, Destiny Draw, and Allure. So no monster there to shuffle back, but it is a pretty powerful hand if they ever do draw a monster. So that's kind of interesting there. Nothing to shuffle back, but a lot of interesting cards. And now we know a little bit more about what to play around. So they're going to set 2 more, pass back to us. We draw Monster Reborn, which is going to be pretty good here. We get the Barrier Statue back, and then we can potentially go for that and pass. I don't really feel the need to attack in their set. If it's like Sangan, they get to search out something here, which I obviously don't want. I mean, there's arguments for like not giving this an attack if it's Sangan because they can just flip the Sangan Crash. But again, that takes their battle phase, right? And if we can deprive them of a battle phase, I feel like that's still pretty good. So we are just going to leave this an attack, pass back to them, see what they do. And they're going to think about this, and they're going to go for Allure here, draw 2, banish 1. So it seems like they did draw into a dark. They're going to banish a Dad. I mean, I'm happy about that. One less Dad in deck to worry about. They go for Greffer here. I go for TT because Greffer can beat over the Barrier Statue. So I want to get value here while I can. Go for TT. They've got Crush Card, though, for their set monsters, so that's a bit awkward here. But, we do lose the Malicious Edge, and now we're under Crush Card there. But we do have Reborn during back the Disc Commander, so that can be pretty good for us here. Draw 2 more. Yes, that will be under Crush Card, but still, we're getting deeper into the Dark Callings, potentially. So we draw another Barrier Statue here, which is pretty good. I can set us up for some plays later. We're going to go for Reborn, target the Disc Commander, just bring back an attack, why not? Draw 2, see what we get, and we draw into a Malicious Edge and another Barrier Statue. So that is, but unfortunately we lose the edge there. But the good thing about this is that, we've got more Fiends in grave for our Dark Callings if we draw them later, right? So that's the important thing. I go to battle and just attack him with Disc Commander there. Get in for 300. Might as well poke, summon out a Barrier Statue, and then just pass back to my opponent. See what they do. Figure that, this is pretty good at just walling off, any spell summons that they might have, and they're going to pass back to us. We draw into a Prisma, which will get popped by the CCV as well. So that's a bit unfortunate. Would have been nice to send a Grand Mole to grave as well to get set up later. Or just another Malicious Edge, honestly, out of the deck. But right now we're going to do another big misplay here. We're going to attack him with the Disc Commander and the Barrier Statue. The reason I did this in the moment was because I was like, well, if they Mirror Force, they can summon out another Barrier Statue. But I think in hindsight, that would have been a bit bad because giving them back the Disc Commander is just a little bit awkward here, I think, overall. So, yeah, it just gives them more options for Darks and Grave. And so I want to prevent that from happening if I can. So I think that was a bit of a misplay on my part. Luckily, it didn't really matter there overall. But, you know, it could have potentially mattered. And just giving my opponent the option to get rid of the barrier statue is not good. So they go for alert, banishing another dad. So that's 2 dads out of the deck. So I feel pretty good about that. They have to get into that last dad. I mean, they could have another dad in hand. Maybe that's why they banished the one that they had. But they're going to go for a Greffer here, attack over the barrier statue of the Drought, and then set 1, pass back to us. So luckily they don't have too much extension that they can do here. We draw a Crush card of our own, which is actually kind of cracked with the Disc Commander on field. So I feel pretty good about that. And we're just going to summon out this barrier statue here, switch the Disc Commander defense, and then I choose to set the Brain Con and the Crush card. Now, this is potentially a mistake, and I actually think in hindsight it probably was a mistake because I don't think that the dad deck is playing much backer removal, like Dust Tornado or MST or something like that. They probably play MST, but it's like one of them in their deck. I don't think they're siding into more backer removal against this deck specifically. Maybe after seeing Release from Stones they are, but you could argue that they're probably not. And so the reason I set both of these is I'm like, well, if they've got like a Dust Tornado or something like that in the end phase, I don't want them to just hit the Crush card that they know about here because Crush card is so good here. It stops the Greffer from beating over the barrier statue. And I'm in a really, really winning position if I prevent anything from beating over this barrier statue, right? So that's why I chose to set both. But you could argue that doing this opens me up to something like a Heavy Storm off the top, and then I lose Brain Calm, which is very, very powerful here. So yeah, it's a bit of an iffy one. I could have also, now, yeah, I feel like it's either hold the Brain Con in hand or just set them both. And let me know down in the comments which one you prefer. But we'll see what happens in the end of the game. Again, this could just be hindsight for how this particular game turns out talking here. And this could actually be the correct move overall. But it was kind of, yeah, it's a moment where you could debate it, right? And I'm going to go for Crush card here, tribute the Disc Commander, pop that Greffer, see what else is in hand. I want to do this before they potentially tribute out a Jinzo or something. But yeah, we hit a Stratos as well, which is very nice. And you see they get a D-Draw, a Brain Con, a Return, and a Dimfuse. So more ways to bring back things from the Banish Zone. All they have there is a Mally that they can't bring back anyways. So our Barrier Statue is putting in a lot of work here. And they're just going to set 1 and pass back to us. We draw Dark Calling, so we can actually use that. And I might actually want to do it because I can just switch the Barrier Statue to defense here. I get a Barrier Statue in rotation here for Release from Stone, so that's pretty good as well. And this thing goes up to 3,600. I switch the Barrier Statue that I have on Field of Defense because I know about Mirror Force. And then I'm going to attack in for 3,600 here, dropping them down to 2,800 next turn. If they don't do anything here, they're dead. But unfortunately for us, they do have a Lightning Vortex here. So they're able to go for Vortex here, clear our board, and put us in kind of an awkward spot. So they're going to pitch the Dimfuse, get rid of our board there, and then pass back to us. We draw Gigantes, which is really good here. Some of the Gigantes attack in for 1,900. See what they do here. They're going to go for Mirror Force. And ultimately, this is a bit of a thinker, but I decide to go for a bit of a greedy play. Oh, no, wait, I don't. Okay, I thought I did Release from Stone there to bring back the Barrier Statue and then attack in for 1,000 more. I guess I didn't. In hindsight, maybe I should have, actually, because it is a greedy play, but it does shut off their plays. And if they do something like Chain Return, right, I don't care about that because, you know, Barrier Statue still beats over Mally if I want to get that engrave, which, you know, I probably can because it's like 5 darks there. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe I should have just gone for Release from Stone and attacked in because they pay off their life points. You know, they're going down to 1,400 that is. So that is a very, very good clock for us. They draw into an upstart there. And then they're going to pass back to us. We draw into a Mirror Force here, which is pretty good. So now this turn, I actually decide to go for the greedy play. That's what I was thinking of. I go for the barrier here, and they're going to let that go through. So I bring out the Barrier Statue and then attack in for 1,000. So drop them down to 1,800. And then I'm going to set this pass back to them. So let's see what they do here. They're going to go for a G-Draw, pitching the Mally. So they finally drew into that and then draw 2 more here. They're going to go for an upstart, giving us 1,000 more life. And then go for another upstart, giving us 1,000 more life here as well. And then they're going to go for a Cyber Valley here, go for Brain Con on our Barrier Statues. That is a bit worrying here. They're going to banish that and draw 2 more. And unfortunately, we don't have another Release from Stone here. So I don't know, maybe bring out the Barrier Statue. The drought was a bit greedy there because they could do Brain Con into Valley and do all that shenanigans there. But honestly, you know, if I'd brought out the Barrier Statue turn earlier, they actually wouldn't have the life points to pay for the Brain Con. So maybe it wasn't greedy at all. Who's to say? There's a lot in this sort of late game state that, you know, I could argue should have been done differently, right, on my part. And I think I would argue that. Because again, I'm still learning how to play the deck. I'm sure if I had a lot more reps under my belt for this deck, things would be a bit different here. But unfortunately, it is what it is. It is how we've got it. And unfortunately, this turn, they're actually able to pop off and actually win the game. So it's kind of wild, but they are actually able to set that up. And, I did not expect it because they had 1, 2, 3, 4 Darks Engraved there before. But they did figure out a way to get there. So they're going to banish 2 to draw 2 with Valley. And then they're going to think about this a bit. And they're going to decide to banish the Valley here and, a card from hand to then stack the Grepher on top of their deck. Now they've got 3 Darks Engraved, so they can go for the last Dad in their deck. And then they can go for Dad and pop our back row. And while this is not the end of the game specifically, it might as well be. This is pretty rough for us here. We need to have a way to get over the Dad here and get him for lethal, but it is very unlikely that will happen. They pop their own Mally because, it's a liability to them because we can just attack over that for game potentially. And then they go for return here to bring back a bunch of monsters. So we are in a bad spot. They go for Rhoda as well. They search out the Grepher that is left in deck, and then they can attack in for 28, 24, and 17. So we're not dead yet, but we might as well be. We're in a really bad spot. And then main 2, they're going to banish 2 with the Valley here. They're going to pitch with the Grepher and then pitch a Demock as well. And then they're going to go for Dad, or they're going to go for Valley first, draw 2. And then they're going to go for Dad, pop their own back row here and set 1. So this means that they probably have another return set up here. So we are just cooked next turn. And Grand Mole will not do it for us. I mean, we have one play here, and it's just to summon the Grand Mole, attack in the Dad, and hope there's not return because they've only got 2 Darks Engraved. But, I mean, that is 100% return. There's no reason you pop your own Dust Shoot here unless you're trying to set up the Demock and the Banish Zone to bring back off return. So, yeah, they do need to have return, and they do actually manage to win the game from that. So, again, I think in the final couple of turns of this game, there were some decisions I could have made to actually turn this game around potentially and potentially win the game, right? The setting of BrainCon and Crush Card, I think that is potentially a crucial play in this game because if I had BrainCon online, I could have BrainConned the Dark Arm Dragon Balls on field and, use that to pop their board, get in for lethal. They would have had to pop their own board with the Dad, and so it would have been a bit less good for them. I could have just summoned out Grammel, tried to attack in. They would have had to use the return there to bring back the Demock and then get back a spell, but it might not have been enough for them here. So, I mean, it probably would have because they probably have return, or not return, but, Reborn somewhere here. So you can go Reborn, bring back Zerato, and then you've got a Grepher in hand as well. So, yeah, Pre-Mat was shut off, but they probably have not return, but Reborn somewhere there. So I think we still would have lost this one, even if they, well, maybe not. I don't know. Yeah, even if we had held the BrainCon in hand, I think we still would have lost this one. They had ways to get around it. And, yeah, so that's a bit rough. But I do think that, getting more aggressive with the barrier statue was definitely the bigger mistake. I should have either held the Release from Stone until they did something, or I should have just brought this back the turn the Gigantes died and tried to get in for more damage, because I think it actually would have turned out better there. I knew about the BrainCon, so I knew that, if they had over 800 life points, they could use it and potentially break my board. So I just had to, I think, get aggressive here and try and whittle them down as much as possible, or I had to take the opposite approach and just leave the Barrier Statue banished for when they actually went for a play to special summon, and then I Release from Stone, bring back to stop that play. So, yeah, but again, I think this deck is very, very complex, which is kind of surprising because generally when you think about these OTK-style decks, they seem pretty straightforward, right? You do a very linear play to get your OTK online. But I think what makes it different is that while the deck can OTK, it's not really going for a full OTK thing. It's mainly going for a lockdown strategy that also brings out big guys as well to pressure the opponent. So I think it's actually very well suited to face the Dad Return deck, even though we lost this game here. But with more practice and more people playing this deck, I think it could potentially rise even higher in the future. But, I want to show this off against the meta threat, but how does it do against other non-Dad Return decks? Because a lot of those decks are a bit more aggressive, so it might have a pretty rough matchup against that, especially considering that those decks that are more aggressive can just beat over this thing. So let's actually watch one of those matches and see how this deck actually performs. Okay, we got a game against Clemens 12 here, a frequent guest on the channel. Always a pleasure to have them on. We're going to be diving into the game. Unfortunately, we are going second here, so we won't be able to set up our Barrier Statue shenanigans, but it looks like they're on 6 Sims anyways, so it looks like the Barrier Statue stuff won't matter. We don't have Barrier Statue in hand anyways, but they're going to summon a Zanji, bring out the Grandmaster there, and then go for a Great Shogun Shien, which is about as good of a starting hand as you can have here. We tried a Heavy and True Nade, so we can use the Heavy to try and clear away that back row. This will be our one activation this turn, but frankly, that's all we're really doing. And actually, we have a pretty decent setup here for the follow-up. What we can do is after we go for heavy, we can set the Sangan. If they attack over Sangan, which they likely will, we search out an Infernal Prodigy, and the next turn we can Caius their Shogun Shien, attack over their Grandmaster, and we're in a really good spot. So they're going to Solemn the Heavy Storm, which is a bit scary for us. It means that back row is something that they want to protect. We set a Release from Stone here, and you might wonder why I'm doing that when I don't have the rock set up. But given that I'm going to search out Infernal Prodigy here, and then I'm going to go for a Caius play, I don't actually anticipate having a rock banished anytime soon. So what I want to do is actually I want to stem damage here. If they summon out a Yaichi to pop the backer, they won't be able to attack with it. So I figure that can get a little bit more value than the Release from Stone would otherwise. And if they have like 2 6-Ams in hand, for instance, that they're deciding between, them going for Yaichi and not using it to attack does actually protect our life points quite a bit. So they do need to go for the Yaichi there. The last card in hand was a Fisher, so, they didn't have the other 6-Am anyways. But at least we're saving 1,300 life points here. So we searched out the Prodigy. They're going to attack in for 4,600 here. And they did a lot of damage either way. So, whether the 1,300 life points would matter or not, that depends. But either way, we can do our play here. Now, because they protected that back row so much, I am a bit worried about that. So I'm going to go for a True Nade here, bounce that back just so I can make this play. And I actually have 2 options here. I can potentially go for Malicious Edge instead of the Infernal Prodigy here. And what that would do for me is I can attack over the Grandmaster 6 Samurai, get a draw in the end phase. And then in the follow-up, they do have Shien on field, but it can't beat over Malicious Edge. And Zanji can actually not kill it either, because Zanji needs basically 3 6-Ams on field to actually use its effect, because you need 1 to replace the destruction of it, and then you need a 2nd to actually be able to trigger that effect, because it only activates if you actually control another 6-Am on field, at the end of the damage step. So I could just go for that play, and it might actually be the better play. But the play that I go for instead is I go for tributing the Infernal Prodigy to summon out Caius to then banish the Shien there, and then attack over their Grandmaster that way. So I think this is also a fine play, and it does give me a bit more options later in case I draw something that I want to use, whereas Shien shuts all that off. So I decided to go for this, but in hindsight, the Malicious Edge play might have been a little bit better. Now, knowing what they have in hand here, it wouldn't matter either way, or maybe it would have because of the draw, but actually would not matter either way because they would actually just kill me here. So, yeah, so ultimately I think it's fine, the play I did, but I think the other play was also fine. It depends on if they have the one of Fisher or the one of Smashing Ground or something like that, or just some way to clear my monster, which they might. But yeah, I just go for Rhoda here, search out a Stratos, and hopefully, I can get over that Yaichi and potentially protect myself a little bit more. I still don't have the Stratos here. Don't use the effect. You might wonder why this is. I'm trying to play around pulling the rug because, this deck might be teched out to beat, something like, I don't know. You probably aren't facing Perfect Circle that much, but maybe they're playing the pullings just to try and outgame people who are playing the Stratos to search. Or if the deck's playing Caius, maybe you have the pulling in there for that. But I just go for no effect because I figure either way, this turn will be the turn that decides what happens here, right? Actually, I think no. I was going to say, I think in hindsight, maybe I should just search out Infernal Prodigy if they clear the Stratos this turn, but if they clear the Stratos this turn, then Infernal Prodigy won't matter. I can spell something out, sure, but it has to be an attack, and they can just beat over it either way. So, yeah, they do have Bottomless there, so that's just going to be the end of the game either way. And we're going to go on to the second game. Now, I side out the Barrier Statues and the Release from Stone package, I believe, for some Dim Prizzes, and I also bring in the Legendary Jujutsu Masters. So, Legendary Jujutsu Master, yes, they do have Iroh, but if they don't have Iroh on field to, attack into it, then they can potentially bounce back a 6-Am and potentially set them back a fair bit. So, I feel pretty good about that side deck choice there. We're going to go for dealings here. Potentially set up Malicious Edge in Graveyard to then pre-map back, so I feel like that's pretty good. And we are going, they do a thingy face, so we actually, just put that back briefly. Because Gravekeeper's Watcher is a thing that you could potentially play here. I don't know why you would, but if you are crazy enough to play it, you can. And so that would stop the dealings. I'm not sure why you'd side that in here, but it could work. So, but luckily they didn't have that. So we just drew into the card destruction either way. And we pitched the Malicious Edge. Now it's engraved for the pre-mat and also for the Dark Calling. But, again, in hand or engraved doesn't really matter for Dark Calling, but it more for the pre-mat there. We're going to set a Sangan, set a Dim Priz, pass back to them. This deck could be playing Knock, to be fair. But, I'm not sure they bring in Knock against what is probably going to be an Evil Hero deck, because they did see Infernal Prodigy. So, if not, maybe they view it as a Monarch deck. So, they might be doing stuff for that. But our opponent's going to activate 6 Samurai United here. Very scary whenever they do that. They're going to go for Reasoning here. Now, this is a bit of a thinker. I could potentially just call 5 or 7, right? 7, I don't really, well, 7 might be right because I do have Dark Calling, Pre-Mat, and Card Destruction here, all of which are kind of rough. But if they do go for, like Shien, like the Great Shogun, and they bring that out off the reasoning here, then I probably just change what I search off Sangan. So I like search into the Jujutsu Master, and then I go for Dark Calling, bring out a 3900 attack point guy to beat over the Shogun Shien. And so that's my one spell that I need to use there. I also have Dim Priz to banish it anyways if they don't go for like Yaichi. So I think, honestly, the thing that I'm afraid of is them getting Yaichi on field because Yaichi stops the Dim Priz, whereas Dim Priz stops anything else that they might get out off reasoning. So what I decided to do here is I call 3. Unfortunately, they hit into a Grandmaster, so that's very good for them because that is a level 5, so they're able to go for that. And now they go for Rhoda as well, and seeing that I called 3, they're going to search at a Yaichi here because, they know that I'm afraid of that Yaichi coming down and sniping that back row. So, calling 3 does sort of play my hand a little bit there. But again, I do think it is probably the right choice off that reasoning there because, if they don't have like Rhoda or something, then, I think it's pretty good. But or the Yaichi in hand already, I guess, which they might have. But I think it is ultimately a good call here. And unfortunately, we do get a bit punished for it. But they probably would have gone for Yaichi anyways, right? Like, I feel like Yaichi's a bit more useful here than, like, Iroh would be the other choice. And I feel like you don't know what deck I'm playing enough to, like, necessarily go for Iroh as the pick. And also, if it is Legendary Jujutsu Master instead of Sangan, right? Like, you're probably tagging into it with Grandmaster there. If you bring out the Yaichi and getting Grandmaster on top of the deck, you don't really care about that because you just special summon it out next turn anyways. So, especially when you have another United there. This time I do call 7 because we might be in a bad enough spot where, like, I do want to use up the card destruction or some of my other things here. So, I do call 7 just in case. And it's sort of like the last thing that, like, I'm afraid of. They hit Grandmaster, and that can actually not be summoned on this board, even though it can be normal summoner set because you can only control one Grandmaster 6 Samurai at a time. So even though that does stop the reasoning, it will not actually be able to come out. So they do have the Shien in hand though, so they will bring that out anyways. And now we're in kind of an awkward spot. So they're going to attack into the Sangan, and I have a couple options here. I could go for the Jujutsu Master, just go for the calling play, but since I have Pre-Mat, I think I might want to go for Pre-Mat instead. So I do go for Jujutsu Master though here because it's probably the best thing I can search out anyways. I mean, there is an argument for going for Prodigy because then, if I top deck a Caius, it's really good. But I think Jujutsu Master just gives me more options here. So, yeah, they're going to attack in for 2,500 there with the Shien and pass back down. So we draw into calling here. We could use the calling now, but we're just going to go for the pre-mat on the Mali. You could argue that I should have just gone for calling instead, but I feel like this is fine. Also, if they have Crow, this baits out the Crow more than the calling, but like, if they got Crow, I probably want a calling there anyways, because then I at least bring out something, right? I bring out the 2,300 attack point guy, which, wouldn't be that good, because ideally you want to banish the edge, but at least I still get value off the calling in some capacity, right? So, but I think that the pre-map play is fine. And now I go for the Malicious Edge over the Shien, because again, that's kind of annoying for me here. Cuts off a lot of my plays. And now I set the Jujutsu Master pass back to them. If they get through the Jujutsu Master with something like an Iroh, I feel fine about that because, it'll be engraved for calling. So I think that's fine. They can't use Yaichi to pop the pre-mat here. That was a mistake on their part. But ultimately, it doesn't matter too much. They do have the Iroh in hand, so they can summon that out, pop the Jujutsu Master there. And ultimately, I think we're in a good spot because they still can't clear the Malicious Edge. But they go for a Grandmaster attacking into the Malicious Edge, which is very interesting here. But I do like the reason why they do it, because they've got another Grandmaster in hand. So this puts another counter on United. They can use that United to draw 2 more and hopefully get away to out the edge. Unfortunately, they do not draw it, or unfortunately for them, that is. We draw Dust Shoot as well, which is very, very nice into this board. We can attack into the Yaichi there just because of most damage. And then we can set the Dust Shoot, pass back to them. We go for Dust Shoot immediately, see what they got in hand. See, they've got a Zanji, a Cyber Dragon, and a Reborn. Now, they do have 3 monsters on field, so, they can actually pop our Malicious Edge with the Zanji, so I actually do want to send that back instead of the Sidra. And them having a Reborn in hand is also kind of awkward for us, so this is a bit awkward for us to play out. They go for Swords to stall us a little bit here, and then pass back to us. So, now I think card destruction is actually going to be really good here, because 1, we draw deep in our deck, potentially draw into a Caius to out the Swords. But 2, we get rid of the Reborn for them. And Reborn's a very, very strong card. So I am just going to set 1 calling and then go for card destruction, pitching a calling and a Dim Priz, drawing 2 more. We actually draw into Caius and the Infernal Prodigy here. So that's actually pretty neat. Now I just tribute over the Mali for the Caius because I want to get rid of that Swords and get beating into their board as quickly as possible there. So I go for that. And I ultimately go for the Dark Calling just to clear the other 6am on field, because 6ams really want at least one 6am on field by the end of their turn, so they can do more plays on their follow-up. So I just figured it's best to just go for the Calling now and beat over that Grandmaster, beat into that Iroh there, and just really put on the screws for them. So they are going to just admit defeat there. So it seems like they did not have the tools they needed to beat our board there, which is, one of the powerful things about this deck is that, like, if you set up your board, it can be very tough for your opponent to break. So we're going to go into game 2. This is a great opening hand. We got Prodigy plus Caius. I mean, that is, ideal, right? You get to banish one of their things. We got Heavy to deal with their things as well. And they're going to go for an Iroh, a Sword, and 2 back row that we don't know the identity of, even though I scrolled over them on DB here. But they do go for Dust Shoot, and Dust Shoot is going to be a bit awkward for us. They're going to send back the Prodigy because it's the one thing that we can actually use on board this turn. There's also an argument for sending back Caius, but I do like sending back Prodigy because I think it makes sense here. Because if we draw into like a Malicious Edge as well, the turns on that. So, yeah, I think it makes sense to send that back. But it does mean that if we ever draw into the Caius, we're going to be in a pretty good spot. Now we go for the Heavy here, and, there's arguments for not going for Heavy, but the reason I do it is because they know about the Heavy now. And so, like, I figure might as well use it now because they're not going to play into it in the future. That might have been a bad move on my part, but I think it ultimately is fine. Just try and clear that sword and whatever else they have. Not that I'm attacking in swords this turn anyways, but it also is kind of awkward because if I want to set TT here, which is the play that I'm going to make this turn, I'm not going to set Dimpriz because I don't want them to just summon out Yaichi, pop the Dimpriz, and if they just attack him with Iroh every turn, I'm fine with that. So I'm just going to set the TT in case they do that. But if I set the TT and they don't summon into this, then the Heavy becomes a lot more awkward. So I figure I'll just use the Heavy now. And they do Solemn that, so I actually feel very good about that because I wasn't planning on really clearing these swords this turn because I don't really have the aggressive pressure. But I am happy to set this TT, pass back to them. So they go for Yaichi here. I will just go for TT, pop the board, which is kind of what I was anticipating. Again, I don't care if they just poked in with Yaichi every turn, or not Yaichi, but Iroh every turn. I really cared about if they summoned out Yaichi, popped our back row. So yeah, I think TT was the correct set there. And we draw another Caius, which is not going to be the best for us, but I can just set this Dimpriz here and pass back to them. And that can potentially deal with whatever else they bring out. They're going to go for Reasoning here, and I call 5 because I think 5 would be kind of annoying, like just bring out a Grandmaster for something. I think in hindsight, maybe I could have called 3, but the reason I don't call 3 is because they probably only have 2 3s left in their deck, whereas we know that they've got Cider, we know they've got Grandmaster, so I think 5 is actually one of the more common outcomes here, and I don't necessarily want them to get that in rotation. But maybe I should have called 4 instead, because 4 is also a very common number for them. So, I don't know. There's debates either way, but ultimately it's a 4. So they go for Iroh here, and they're going to go for Zanji as well. Now, there is a bit of a sort of decision to make here. Do I banish the Zanji or the Iroh? Because I am playing Legendary Jiu-Jitsu Master in the deck here. So, it might actually be better to banish the Iroh to prevent them from actually getting rid of that. But ultimately, I decide on just, getting rid of the thing that does more damage, and also getting rid of the thing that if I set up a big monster on board, they can potentially set up a board to actually clear it with the Zanji. So I decide to banish the Zanji here. So, and then I just take 17, and they're going to pass back to us. We draw Sangan. Sangan is great. We can search out Prodigy, and then Prodigy into Caius, which is very, very good. So I go for Sangan here, and I do search out the Prodigy, because I do think it's the best choice here. I could have also searched out Legendary Jiu-Jitsu Master, set up a Gigantes play later, but I feel like Prodigy is just much better. They're going to set 2 back row, pass back to us. I draw Card Destruction, a great way to just extend further, especially if my opponent is not gaining anything off of this, then I feel like it's even better. But I'm just going to bring out a Prodigy here, tribute that for a Caius, target the Iroh, but they do have a Solemn, so I don't even get to target technically, but either way, they're going to Solemn that, which makes sense. I think about this a bit, and I ultimately decided to pass. I could have Card Destruction here to dig deeper for more gas, but I feel like I'm in a pretty good spot already, right? Like, if I can get away to bring Gigantes down field, that's pretty good. If I can draw into another Prodigy, then I can go for Caius again and banish their thing. And I'm not really in a pressure situation here, so I feel like I'm in a pretty good spot. Here, I do ultimately call 7 because the one playmaker I have next turn is Card Destruction, so I don't want them to, like, hit Chien, and then I go for Card Destruction, and I draw a hand of all spells that I can't use, right? So I think 7 is the right choice here. Unfortunately, I hit 5, so they're able to bring out a Sidra and get the clock up to a 2-turn clock here. So this is a bit scary for us because we are at risk of losing next turn if we don't draw anything here. Stratos is a pretty good draw, so I could go for Stratos right now, get a search, have one more card in hand for Card Destruction, and one more card out of the deck for Card Destruction as well. So I do go for Stratos, search out Malicious Edge, and then I go for a Card Destruction here, trying to draw into something like a Dark Calling. That would be ideal at this juncture. We draw into a Premat, which is also pretty good. Now, I have 2 options here, because I can actually push for lethal with this Premat here if I activate it before going for the True Nade. However, I am very worried that they've got a bottomless in the macro there, because we saw bottomless game 1 and it really cooked us that game. And I think I'm in a good spot if I can clear both their monsters here, so I don't really feel the need to have to like push for lethal this exact turn. But just in case I go for a Dark World Dealing, see what I get. If I draw into a Dark Calling here, I think I'm not sure if I can get lethal from this with Dark Calling. I mean, it'll be 1900 plus 2600. That's 4500. So actually that would be lethal off Dark Calling and Grenade. So if I draw into Dark Calling, then I pitch the pre-mat and win the game that way. But if not, it's probably not that big of a deal. I draw on the Caius, so I'm just going to pitch the Caius there. Probably would have been a good draw later, but I was trying to go for lethal. And I think either way here, I'm in a good spot for my board. So there's argument that I should have saved the Dark World Dealings there for after I, see what I get next turn, because again, I can clear their board with what I have here. But I think it's fine going for now, just getting a bit greedy to push for lethal. But I'm going to attack in with the Malicious Edge and the Stratos, clearing their entire board and passing back to them. They go for smashing on the edge. Step 1, pass back to us. We draw into a Prisma here. We can just summon out Prisma, go for the Prisma to, send a Grand Mole, but it won't matter here. 6 Sams don't have much defensive pressure, so I can just feel free to attack him with Prisma and then Stratos, or Stratos then Prisma. It's still lethal either way. So either way, some very, very good games there. I'm just sending Malicious Edge off the Malicious Fiend and yeah, getting in for lethal there. So that will do it for this deck though. And I really, really like this deck. Going into it, I was kind of tentative because I was initially conceiving this as sort of just an OTK deck, playing things like Mass Beast and like Valkyrian just to get as big a body on board as possible with the evil hero Dark Gaia. But, I'm really happy with how the deck turned out, where it's sort of more of a control deck that has some big bombs with the Dark Callings. So I think this deck is actually pretty well suited to be an anti-meta pick in this format. And as you saw here in this game, you can still beat decks that are going more aggressive, right? Because this deck can go fairly aggressive at different points. It can get rid of key points of interaction with the Caiuses if you draw into those. And Jujutsu Master is very, very good against these aggressive decks as well. So, while you might be losing game 1, games 2 and 3 are likely to go your way, I think, unless people counterside against you, which this deck is still new enough that I don't think people are going to counterside that much. But I do like this deck a lot, and I'm curious to see if people continue to play this format, which, there's a very good chance that not many people continue to play this format because the format is kind of degenerate. But I'm curious to see how this deck will evolve if people continue to play the format and try to experiment with it further. Now, if you want to play this format for yourself, head over to the YGO from Zero Discord server, linked in the description down below. Great place to find games in any of the formats that I feature on the channel. And also, we hold weekly locals and monthly tournaments that are multi-day events. So if you can't attend the locals, the monthly multi-days are good for you. But it's just a great place to also just discuss the different decks and gameplays and stuff like that. So I encourage you to join that if you like retro Yu-Gi-Oh! Also, if you want to see more of my coverage of Dad Return, it will probably be only one more video in Dad Return, but also be going on into the next formats after that. So if you want to see more of that, subscribe to the channel as well. And if you want to support me directly, I do have a Patreon linked in the description down below. And if you join the Patreon, get shouted in these videos. So big shouts to Rincewind, Portrait, Brent Knocker, Tyler Crompton, GeoMyFest, Dump Truck, Scout Zero, Damon Hess, and I'm pretty sure that's it. If I missed someone, then let me know down in the comments below. But I think I've got that pretty memorized by this point. Anyways, that's going to do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed as always. Until next time, I've been Ben from YGF from Zero, and I'm signing off. Peace.